Hi everyone. Happy Friday from Toronto. Dr. Amin here. Great to have you all here. Just wave or say hi if you can hear me. I love to hear where you're tuning in from today. Drop your city or town in the comment box. Hi. So we're going live today to talk about nutrition, to talk about food, which I think is very important, especially during the transition phase, during perimenopause. Hi, salam to everyone here. We're going live today talking to Jen, and we're speaking about food, which I think is very important. Do write here in the comments where you're tuning in from today, this lovely Friday. And if you have any questions, drop it in the comments, or you can always, if you want to be more private, you can just write it in the question bubble. And we make sure to get back to some of those questions. Hi, Nushin. Hi, Sharare. Lovely to see you all. So we are going to talk about nutrition and food. We will have another live next week to talk about all the other questions, but today our focus is about food and nutrition, and I think I can see Jen here now. Let me invite her.
Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Oh, wait, I'm echoing very loud. Okay. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you very well.
Thank you. Good
Lovely
to
to have
see
you.
you. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to join you. I'm excited to be
Yes.
here to talk about one of my favorite topics.
That's great. We love to hear you. We love to hear about nutrition and about diet and food during especially
Yeah.
perimenopause.
Yeah. Well, I think this is just such an opportunity for women. Unfortunately, so many of us start to not feel our best, right? As we start to go through this
Mhm.
perimenopause transition and we start to notice things from weight is creeping up or just my body is changing, fatigue, brain fog, the hot flashes. We start to notice all of these things. And some women are very lucky enough to go through it with very little change. But it just becomes this great opportunity to revisit the foundations of health and almost have like what I like to call of it almost like a little bit of like a rebirth and reconnecting to what really matters. And, especially in a world where there is so much noise, some of it good and some of it really confusing in social media and even from our own personal healthcare practitioners, it's just such an opportunity for women to really like be in touch with themselves and their needs and their desires and their goals and how food and lifestyle can play in with medicine, hormone replacement, and we've so many levers at our disposal. And I love that the conversation is becoming really loud. And so women really are getting a lot of information that they can, no pun intended, digest and absorb and figure out what really works for them.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I call it this time, it's so many changes. It's like a perfect storm for our bodies. The changes that it's like happen all overnight. And
yeah,
it seems that your body is rewriting all the rules overnight with your energy, sleep, your
yeah.
gut health, everything's all of a sudden. And as you said, some are so lucky, but most, at least patients I see, a lot of people at least have one or two symptoms.
For sure. And I think for the vast majority of us, some of us like look at this as such a time of dread. And for sure, if you're not feeling well, that is not a time to celebrate, right? But I
Mhm.
really love repositioning this as a time to reinvest in our health and our body telling us maybe some of the things that you were able to get away with when you were younger. We need to rethink that and reframe that. And we have an opportunity to kind of reset our goals and reset, just really think about like, my hope is that women, you're going to live potentially a third or even maybe a half of your life,
Mhm.
like outside of perimenopause. Like or postmenopause. I'm turning 50 next week, and you know, I have longevity genes and I live a very healthy lifestyle. And so there might be 50 more years that have a whole new opportunity to
Mhm.
redefine my health and my goals. And so this is just such a great opportunity to say, this is no longer serving me. And how can I maybe fine tune that? And um, I think women's relationship with food, at least the women that I work with, is sometimes complex, especially those of us who maybe are in our 40s, 50s, even 60s. When we were younger, we were in a place of calorie counting, and the focus so much more was on how do we make ourselves look a certain way. And not that that is gone, and how we look, many of us still care about that, and that is still, I think, something, if you care about that, like, you should care about that, right? But we also are really having more conversations around how do I just feel? How do I feel in
Mhm.
my own skin? How is my energy? How am I fueling my workouts? How am I fueling a busy day with family, work, all of that? And so we can certainly dive into some of the specific nutrition recommendations that I really like to focus on with my clients. But it is really a nice shift where, there
Mhm.
I've seen, I don't know if any of your followers have seen sort of this like I do not care club that kind of got very big on, it was Instagram for a
Yeah.
short moment, and it was this woman in her car, in perimenopause, and it was just like, I do not care about these things. And so for some of us, it is a way to let go of like, I'm no longer a size X and I may be a size Y.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
we start to care more about our own internal, drivers
mhm.
and things that are really important for us.
It
So,
is.
yeah.
And that's where I think then food or nutrition can make this transition, I believe, for some harder or smoother. So now the question is, why is it so important, food, and such a game changer in perimenopause? I love to hear that from you.
Yeah. So, food is really like the sustenance and foundation of life, right? Like from everything we just talked about, calories. Calories are a unit of energy. So just our fuel of how
Mhm.
we get through our day, but how our heart beats, how our brain thinks, how our bones grow. Um, and then, of course, all these nutrients that are protective of
Mhm.
heart disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease. There's an opportunity for that. But there's also, I think, this cultural and just very deeply personal piece about food, right? We have to put in that psychology of eating as well. And whether, depending on what country you grew up in, or how your family ate, or what holidays you celebrate, or what your belief systems are around eating animals or eating that, there's a lot of complex things that go into food. And I really try not to be prescriptive in the sense of like, you must eat this and you must eat that, because
Mhm.
you don't like a certain food, like
Yeah.
there's no point in me telling you to eat that, right? And so it's very complex around how we eat, right? And then especially when you start to think about how our hormones play a role in our cravings, in our metabolism, in things like, I just had my blood work done and my cholesterol is creeping up, right? And I'm like, how could that be, right? Because of my hormones are changing and playing a role in that. So it's very complex what to eat. And it's not an easy thing to just sort of oversimplify and say everybody needs to eat this way and everybody needs to eat that way, because we're all unique individual human beings and we all
Exactly.
have different, time to prepare food, where we shop for food, what we have access to, what we can afford, and then of course what we like to eat and what's enjoyable to us.
Mhm. It is
So
very personalized, and that's what we're aiming for, more personalized medicine and
exactly.
going with, yeah, people's likes or dislikes, and
Yeah,
their, yeah, what type of food they like. So that
like
is very important. And what
absolutely.
are we aiming for? What are the goals to
Yeah.
achieve?
Yeah. And I had heard this, like I can't take credit for this, right? But there was somebody, it might have actually been Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. I was listening to one of her podcasts, and she was sort of defining the difference between goals and standards. So within that nuance of your own individual health goals and your own cultural preferences and taste preferences, um, there are those, what I call certain standards, like that we should be trying to meet.
Mhm.
And that's not necessarily easy for some people. It takes a lot more work because they haven't eaten a certain way. And then there are some, and it's like I hear this goal, like my goal is to eat 30 grams of protein at a meal, or my goal is to eat 25 grams of fiber a day. But that's actually should be the standard. Like we should be
Yeah.
really like a goal is a little esoteric for me, whereas like this is really what we should be teaching everybody how to do. And whether you get that 25 grams of fiber from food X or food Y, like that becomes less important to me. Of course, there's certain types of vegetables that will have certain benefits and others will have other benefits, right? But at the end of the day, these are sort of, I've kind of developed these, what I call my nutrition standards, that I think women in perimenopause should be aiming as their baseline. And then everything else becomes things you fine tune. And again, depending on where your starting point is, some of these things might be really easy for you to achieve, and some of these things might feel much more challenging.
Mhm.
In that is a certain amount of protein, is fiber, is plant foods, and then of course movement and other things that just really do have to be a part of your priority set to feel your best, not only now, but my goal is how are you going to feel your best in 10 years, 20 years, maybe 50 more years from now, right? Like we
Yeah.
want to make sure that you're getting through this period of your life feeling really great, but that we're also setting you up
Mhm.
because you can be in perimenopause for 10 years. That's a long time for some women, but
Exactly.
you potentially have a very long life to live. And my goal is to make you feel like that is an achievable way to live the second half of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Yeah,
that's true. It could be half of our life in menopause and then easily 5 to 10 years in perimenopause. So you
exactly.
mentioned about protein. This is
Yeah,
quite a big of a discussion that we keep hearing about it, how much to have protein, how they're important for our health, for the muscles, which are the currency to youth. So what do you normally recommend women in perimenopause, especially about protein intake?
yeah. So I like to keep my recommendations as simple as possible. And so
Mhm.
there are calculations that people can do that is like, roughly about 1.2 to 1.6 kilograms or grams of protein per kilogram a day. But that requires you to get out your calculator and figure out your weight and map everything out. I like to say aim for about 30 grams of protein every meal,
Mhm.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we'll talk about what that looks like. And then a snack should also have protein. So a snack ideally is not reaching for a bag of pretzels and a bag of chips. If you want a bag of pretzels, well, how can we add some protein into that? So you can still
Mhm.
have some of that. And so, what is a good source of protein? Let's just talk about that because I think not that there's confusion. I think the message is really loud and clear, but sometimes like how much protein is in certain foods versus other foods, right? Like you
Mhm.
hear very often when we're talking about plant-based eating that things like nuts are a great source of protein. They are for a plant, but I don't really consider them a great source of protein. Now, if you're a
Mhm.
plant-based eater, we're going to have and weave in a lot of plant-based proteins, but you have to eat a lot of nuts to get 15 to 30 grams of protein. And the amount of calories and the amount of fat that you would get in that is
Mhm.
really not going to be a sustainable thing if we're talking about weight. So
Mhm.
if you eat meat, including, poultry, fish, which is my preference, but obviously not everybody's, that's the most bioavailable protein, which means that your body is going to be able to utilize all the amino acids. Those are the building blocks that are in your protein that we then utilize, not just for our muscles, but almost every system in our
Mhm.
body requires protein. The other thing that's so great about protein is it is satiating, which means it's going to help to keep you full, right?
Mhm.
So that snack of pretzels, you could eat a whole bag and maybe be hungry for dinner in an hour. But if you pair that with maybe some hard-boiled eggs or, a little bit of like a canned tuna or something, that's going to give you a little bit more staying power. So 13 grams of protein, when I'm thinking about kind of what like an animal source looks like, sort of the palm of your hand or like a small chicken breast that's like the size of a deck of cards. Like I think of that as maybe that's about like 10 to 15 grams of protein. So you do have to eat a substantial amount to get that 30 grams of protein a day or per meal. And it becomes really easy to do if you just sort of think about like, I want to try and have, breakfast is a little more challenging because not everybody will eat, other than eggs, will sit down and have like, I definitely will have leftover chicken breast for breakfast. That's the way I eat, but I'm weird. So it has to be a little bit more thoughtful. And sometimes that's where things like yogurt is a great thing you could add in for breakfast or even a snack. Or if you do enjoy protein powders, you can weave that in. But protein at each meal, and then also having that at a snack. And I love weaving in plant-based proteins. While it's a little more challenging, there's so many other health benefits about plant-based proteins as well. So, maybe once or twice a week, if you are an animal, protein eater, weaving in a plant-based protein. I love doing that with beans. I love doing that with like bean and lentil-based pastas. So you feel like you get that nice carby dinner, but you still get all of the fiber and the protein that's in there as well. So that sort of is my first standard is 30 grams of protein per meal.
That's very, very helpful and much easier than the
Yeah,
calculations. Yes.
exactly. And then you can fine tune it, right? You can, if
Yes.
you are really like, if you're really working on building muscle or you're really struggling with blood sugar, for example, maybe we do need to tweak that dial and give you some more. But I think for a starting point and just sort of that baseline, 30 grams is going to be a good place to start.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, this is a time of many women complaining about change in their body composition and more fat around waist and around midsection, with slowing down metabolism, insulin resistance.
Yeah.
So building up muscles and having protein definitely helps with that. What are other things that women can work on and help with that body composition shift?
So the other thing that I think is another standard is our fiber. And in all the noise that is, again, it's great noise, but all the noise that's happening about protein, what I'm seeing with the women that I work with is that they are not eating enough plants and they're not eating enough fiber. And fiber is critically important for so many things. Your gut, which we're going to talk about that a little bit and how that plays a role in just estrogen metabolism and detoxification. But also fiber is, as I mentioned, like my own cholesterol has been creeping up. My blood sugar has been creeping up. Fiber is really important for helping to control some of those other metabolic things that we start to see happening as we start going through the menopause transition. And the gut, just in general, as we age, so both men and women, our gut microbiome, we start to lose the diversity of all of these little, I call them little critters, right? But all these little bacteria, because bacteria always sounds kind of gross to some people, right? But we have these little friendly critters that live and reside inside us. And unfortunately, that diversity, we start to lose that as we get older. Both men and women, that happens to. But specifically, as women go through menopause, we lose some of this very specific bacteria that is receptive to estrogen as our estrogen declines. So our gut starts to look more like a man's gut as we get older. And so fiber, 25 to 30 grams a day. And it is the recommendation for women. Most Americans are getting like 15 grams a day. And so I challenge your listeners, if they're not really paying attention, to take a tracker. Like I'm here in the United States, I really like Chronometer as a tracker. And you don't have to get all crazy with like all the like, how much calories and how much protein you're getting. I just like to track how much fiber you're getting because so many women are like, I ate a big salad today. So it had to be my fiber. I had to get a ton of fiber. And it had like lettuce and maybe like a couple carrots and some tomatoes and peppers, and maybe that salad only had like 5 grams of fiber though. That's not getting you close to 25. So that's again where these plant-based proteins come in, because things like beans, you're going to get like 8, 10 grams of protein. I'm sorry, 8 to 10 grams of fiber in a serving. and you're going to help to keep that beneficial bacteria in balance. And so that also helps to keep us full. Another side effect I hear so often in women going through perimenopause is the bloat that they feel, not just the like weight redistribution, but just their gut seems to change. They can't tolerate things that they used to. And making sure you're getting enough fiber is really helpful in that. Now, you can certainly overdo it. If you're someone who's not eating enough fiber, please don't tomorrow go and eat all the beans because you will feel pretty crummy. So slowly increasing that fiber up to 25. And I like to say 30 because again, it's just 30 grams of protein, 30 grams of fiber.
Yeah.
It just becomes a very easy number to
Easy.
remember. Like 30 is the magic number. And again, using these trackers to identify like whatever your favorite foods are the highest in fiber. Like I happen to love raspberries. So in the summer, you can bet I'm eating a lot of raspberries. So boom, I can get my fiber serving, honestly, like just by eating raspberries all day. So kind of finding like what are the foods already in your area of things you like to eat and eat regularly that you can incorporate and make that more steady. And if you don't eat a lot of fiber, how are some easy ways to kind of sneak it in, like putting chia or flax seeds into maybe a smoothie or sprinkling on a yogurt or sprinkling it into a salad, something. Adding, if you're having a salad, adding beans or even avocados, like a great source of fiber and healthy fat. So kind of finding these foods that you can really maximize without feeling like you have to sit down to eat like a whole bowl of brown rice or something that, because unfortunately a lot of the fiber foods come with carbs. So if we're really trying to watch our blood sugar and just that weight distribution, we have to be mindful of not overdoing it on the carbohydrates too. So it gets a little bit tricky, but that's why I really love using things like seeds, beans. It's hard to really overeat a lot of beans, but you can very easily overeat a plate of rice, right?
Exactly. Lentils, maybe.
Exactly. Love lentils.
I like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
lentils with spice. I like cumin. So
Love.
that's one of my
Yeah.
favorites.
Yeah, I love lentils. I love garbanzo beans. They're just so versatile. Like you can buy these pre-made, or I love taking garbanzo beans and just roasting them in the oven, and you can sprinkle them with whatever is your favorite herb.
Yeah.
Salt and pepper, or you can do like a cumin, you can do like, basil. I mean, you can literally do any type of herb, and then it becomes a really delicious snack or something that you could like sprinkle again on top of a salad or any dish that you mix that even with a rice, and then you get that nice crunch and you get some more of that fiber and protein in there as well. So it's kind of finding these ways to shift what you're already doing, because probably what you're already doing is not working so much anymore. So we're trying to kind of find some new ways around that.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Great.
then,
So
yeah.
we
And then,
talked about protein and we talked about fiber, but then during this time we see a lot of inflammation because of that hormonal shift, because of low estrogen levels, and so body is inflamed, and then we see inflammation in gut as well. We have a lot of this, as you mentioned, bacteria, this the changing of the balance of the bacteria, and then probably likely many women got dysbiosis or that leaky gut, or and as well as that untold that small intestine bacterial overgrowth. I see in my practice with women in perimenopause. So what are your recommendations about just general, apart from fiber, looking after our gut? What are the things that we can do to look after the gut microbiome?
yeah. So this is actually sort of like my third 30, which is plant diversity. And this is not necessarily a day. We want to try and aim for 30 different plants, foods throughout the week. And I know that sounds alarming, like, oh my gosh, that's so much. But nuts and seeds and spices will fit into that. And there's a couple of reasons why I like to really focus on plant foods is you talked about inflammation, whether it's happening in the gut, whether it's happening systemically in the body. Plant foods are full of antioxidants and they are full of phytochemicals, which really help to quell that inflammatory response. Now, if you are struggling, I should just backtrack for a second, right? If you are struggling with things like SIBO or really have dysbiosis in the gut, you probably need to work with a practitioner, like to move up towards that 30 that 30 grams of fiber, but also
Yeah.
that 30 different plant foods, because you may have some things that you don't tolerate as well as
Mm-hmm.
certain other foods, right? You may find that cooked vegetables are better for you than other
Yeah.
vegetables. You may find that foods, um, that are high in FODMAPs you don't tolerate as well. So this is not a
Yeah.
blanket statement.
Mm-hmm.
But it's sort of finding this plant diversity. And my goal when I work with women, especially when they're coming in with a severe sort of gut dysbiosis, is we'll sort of do like almost like a little bit of a elimination or reset diet where it is a little painful for a bit because it is kind of plain and it is, maybe taking away some of your favorite foods. But the goal is to start to rebuild the gut to a place where you can eat a much more broad spectrum of foods. So the 30 plants, again, if you're sort of more in the like healthy, not struggling with a lot
Mm-hmm.
of gut dysbiosis, that's going to help really to quell that overarching inflammation that we're seeing systemically. I do tend to, if women, as they're going through this stage, are really starting to notice a lot of like gut changes. There's sort of the low hanging fruit of the things that you want to maybe consider removing as a trial basis to see if that helps. Um, I do notice that a lot of women struggle to tolerate dairy as they get older. And sometimes it's dairy in all forms, sometimes it's just dairy in, milk and certain types of cheeses. So that could be a thing to play around
For
with.
me was yogurt. Yogurt,
Yeah,
it's very hard. So I don't know if it's the type of yogurt, the way they
yeah,
make it nowadays. So I can't tolerate it for some reason.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so you
Mm-hmm.
kind of have to get curious with yourself. And sometimes it's very obvious, right? You eat something and you immediately have to either go to the bathroom or you notice bloating. Sometimes it's a little more subtle. Um, Gluten tends to be another one that
Mm-hmm.
in most people, I'm not saying that everybody should be gluten free by any stretch, but in most people, it does open up the tight junctions that are in our gut. And the way I like to explain that is if like your cells inside your lining are almost like a brick wall and they should be kind of stacked together very nicely, and all the nutrients that you eat are very strategically go into the gut cells and distributed to the body. But as we start to have a leaky gut, what happens is like they start to kind of almost separate like that. And what happens is
Mm-hmm.
that causes a lot of inflammation in the gut, and you can have smaller protein molecules that shouldn't be entering into the body do. And so gluten tends to cause leaky gut in a lot of people. So again, playing around with that, seeing if cutting gluten out, and gluten I find is not really like a low gluten type of thing. It's either like an
Mm-hmm.
all or nothing to really allow the gut to reset. And while we're doing that and we're playing around with pulling out some of these trigger foods, we are doing a lot of things to help nourish the gut, both with like probiotics and supplementation of things that can be very soothing towards the gut. Again, if it's something like a SIBO, that's going to need medical care. That's going to be outside
Yeah.
of a dietitian, right? Or if, we're sort of trying to remove certain things, I'm always going to want somebody to work with a doctor to make sure there's nothing really going under, going on that is outside of just like I'm not tolerating a certain food or my hormones are changing and my stomach feels weird. We always want to make sure that we're kind of double checking that. So yeah, so it sort of depends also what kind of medical care they are getting and what their
Mm-hmm.
practitioner is doing to kind of help resolve some of that leaky gut and help heal. But the ultimate goal is you aren't, there may be certain foods you just unfortunately can never really eat again, but the goal is to
Mm-hmm.
get you to a place where you have a very diverse diet of things and you can very easily go to a friend's house and enjoy what they're making for dinner and not have to tell them like, I'm sorry, you cooked a whole meal and I can't eat it. Or you can go to you can go out to dinner and you can enjoy a restaurant, right? Like those are things that are very meaningful to lots of people, and that's what
Yes,
life is all about, right? And so we want to
exactly.
make sure that you can enjoy as much things as possible. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And again, during this time, we see in women, a lot of women so all of a sudden develop autoimmune disease
Yes.
and thyroid disease. So, what are how you work with those women? Again, gluten is one of the probably no,
Yeah.
at least I do say for a while, and we see good results. But anything else you recommend with autoimmune
Yeah.
disease?
So with autoimmune, again, that is both it's really tied to leaky gut. So a lot of the times it's going to be very similar
Mm-hmm.
recommendations. What are the trigger foods that are causing whatever that specific symptom? If it's joint pain, if it's, things like um, uh, showing up in your skin, brain fog, we're going to start to do some individualized. It's hard to say that there's just like a
Yeah.
general, everybody remove this. Other things, though, that tend to be irritating towards the gut and can be inflammatory or I know we just talked about the importance of protein, but sometimes protein foods like
Yes.
eggs, soy can be really challenging. So we have to kind of play with the individual and find
Mm-hmm.
out what seems to be triggering all of that and what their sensitivities seem to be. But pulling out gluten and the majors like corn, processed food comes out for most people, to be honest, regardless of
Yes.
whether you're dealing with autoimmune
Sugar
or
and
whether you're just
processed.
trying to lose 5 pounds.
Yes.
Processed food is going to come out as
On
much
top
as
of the
possible.
list. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sugar,
Yeah.
a lot of the refined processed fats that we see in
Mm-hmm.
the seed oils. And again, once you're giving up and moving away from more processed foods, a lot of that stuff just sort of naturally comes out
Yeah.
anyways. Um, so yeah, so that is kind of what I do. And I should say I used to work a lot more with women who had autoimmune conditions and who did have like, thyroid, depending on what type of thyroid you have. A lot of times that
Mm-hmm.
is autoimmune as well. Um, and I don't work with that as much, so I'm not as like up to snuff
Mm.
on what are the greatest recommendations for that. A lot of times I start to like refer out to people who I think if somebody's really struggling with an autoimmune condition, same thing, if somebody's like really struggling with gut, I've tried to sort of focus my niche into something I really feel like I can,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I can't be an expert at everything, right? So just really what
Exactly.
are,
It's
yeah,
hard. Even
exactly.
just nutrition, even just food. So many things.
So many
So many things are
things.
happening.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, so one is asking, should I have iodine in my food or go low iodine or selenium? So these are all sometimes confusing.
Yeah. And again, it depends on what your diagnosis is. It depends on what your levels are. It depends, right? So, like iodine and selenium are critically important for thyroid health and thyroid function, but the thyroid gland is so sensitive and so Goldilocks that that's
Yeah,
not a thing I can answer without knowing
yeah,
you individually and what your labs
exactly.
are.
Yeah,
Um, and I know it's really frustrating because I hear this every day. Like, how do I find a practitioner who can answer these questions for me? And you can't work with everybody that's listening in live either, right? So we
yes,
do our best to help give women
exactly.
their knowledge, but unfortunately, it's just hard to find practitioners that either, like again, I'm in the States, that take my insurance or that I'm going to
Yeah.
pay out of pocket for, and that sort of have a belief system of this more foundational piece of lifestyle first. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's challenging. I wish there was
It
easy answers
is.
for
I
everything.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what about hot flashes? Women have these hot flashes, and any food that can help them with reducing the symptoms and
Yep.
controlling them.
Yeah. So there are studies that show certain types of foods can help and hurt hot flashes, or not hurt, help and quell, or certain types of food can help hot flashes, and certain types of food can make them worse. Sorry, I'm not speaking clearly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be completely honest. In all the working that I've done with women, I haven't seen in my clinical practice things work as well as going on medication or going
So,
on HRT.
mm-hmm.
And I think, well, I love like the whole natural movement. I think we also have to set ourselves up for what is really truthful. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have severe hot flashes that are keeping you up at night, that are, stopping you from doing things, yes, of course, we should look at your diet 1,000%. But that might also be a conversation to have with a medical provider as well. Now, that being said, we talked about processed food. Processed food is linked to having more severe all symptoms of perimenopause. Um, Things like wine, that can be linked to
Mm-hmm.
having more hot flashes. There are some really interesting studies showing things like So isoflavones are a type of a phytonutrient that is found in certain foods like soy foods, that are found in certain foods like flax seeds, and they act as like a very, very weak estrogen, very weak estrogen. I know people have had some fear around these types of foods and using them for breast cancer or maybe promoting breast cancer. But when we look at like the large data, it doesn't seem to be a concern. And they can be helpful in managing the risk of, or just managing your hot flash symptoms. Other foods or nutrients specifically, I should say, things like vitamin E. There's some studies looking at vitamin E, both from food and looking at it in supplement form. It can help to minimize hot flashes. Omega-3 fatty acids. So those types of fats that are in fish, that are in walnuts, studies have shown also that people who have higher levels of those in their diet tend to have less hot flashes. And so the question is like, is it because they just have healthier, more well-balanced whole food diets? Women who have more obesity tend to have more severe symptoms of menopause than women who have lower BMIs. So there's a lot of things that are nuanced in there, but for sure, making sure that you are having a well-balanced diet, that is, your gut is being nourished, that you are eating a whole foods diet and really limiting the processed foods, that's going to be your best bet. And then, of course, there are certain supplements that seem to be also helpful. So that could be a first line to potentially try before going to HRT. But again, maybe you've had different experience in your practice, but I just have not found that like diet has had as much of an impact on hot flashes as I wish they would. It's had great impact on weight. It's had great impact on blood sugar and cholesterol and just body composition, but like those hot flashes can be really challenging. Yeah, but things like black cohosh, there's a lot of really good studies there, and that, you have to kind of do your homework around the quality of the supplement and the dose that's in there, depending on where you live and what's available. Like supplements in general, like they're the Wild West, and so you really have to do your digging on the brand and whether they are looking at third-party certifications to make sure that there is truthfully what's on the label is actually in that product. So black cohosh is a great one. Things like valerian root. There are some companies that have like proprietary blends of different other herbs. Turmeric also can be really helpful for hot flashes. So again, depends sort of how severe they are and how much they're interfering with your life. And so some of these things I think can be super helpful tools, but also having realistic expectations around what they're going to do.
I mean, some women, evening primrose, that's one of the things,
Another
or
great one.
red
Yep.
clover. So these are some
Yep.
of the common herbal remedies women use.
Exactly. Yep.
Yes. And then the next step is bone health.
Yeah. I'm so glad you're asking about that one because I think that's become almost like there's such a great conversation around muscle and like its role in preventing falls,
Yes.
as we get older. But I might be misquoting, but I think the statistic is something like half of all women are going to suffer an osteoporotic fracture at some point in their life, and that can be
Scary.
life altering,
Yeah.
and not in a good way.
Yeah.
So the thing about bone health is, unfortunately, a lot of the groundwork had to be laid while we were younger. So any of us who have teenage daughters or granddaughters or anything like that, we want to make sure that they are thinking about their bones because they're not, because that's really the opportunity to start building our peak bone mass, which really peaks in our 30s. That doesn't mean it's over for us if we have not paid attention to our bones. So of course, most people are very familiar with calcium as being sort of that main building block for our bones. The recommendation is roughly about 1,000 milligrams a day of calcium. I am very much a food first type of person. So we want to look for dairy is a great one, but of course, unfortunately, a lot of us start to lose our tolerability for dairy. So a lot of non-dairy milks, yogurts, all of those things, they will fortify with calcium. There's a lot of great plant sources of calcium as well. Soy, we talked about, a lot of leafy greens.
Yeah.
Exactly. The issue there is it's not as bioavailable. So that's a word I used before. It just means that your body can't always utilize it as easily. There's other compounds that are in the plants that sort of tie up and almost fight for absorption of these nutrients. So that's again why like plant diversity becomes really important here. But there's two other nutrients, especially if you're thinking about supplementing with calcium, um, that I would put as almost like a must have if you were going to take a calcium supplement. And the reason they're a must have is that because there is some concern that not so much with diet, but if you are taking calcium supplements and especially you're taking too much, that some of that calcium can actually calcify in your arteries. And as women get older, we start to get this increased risk of heart disease as well. So the two things that you want to make sure, and they don't have to be in your calcium supplement itself, but they need to be also taken with your calcium supplement. So a separate supplement is vitamin D and vitamin K. And I think a lot of women are familiar with vitamin D for bone health and for so many other things. And that's one of my top. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We wait.
There you go. Yeah, so vitamin D is something that I do recommend for most women anyways. This is not personal medical advice that I'm giving anybody, but it's something most women, especially if you live in a climate that does not have sun all year long. So vitamin D is going to help to make sure that your bones can absorb and utilize that calcium. But vitamin K, a lot of us are not familiar with that. And that really helps to make sure that that calcium is not going into your arteries, like I mentioned, and that calcium will actually go into your bones. So that is, in conversation with your doctor, but something to very seriously consider if you are considering a calcium supplement, is to make sure those two other nutrients you are taking as well. And a lot of times you can find a supplement that has all three, or at least a vitamin D that will also have specifically K2, sometimes also called MK. I just had a brain fart. It's MK7. It's just a specific form of vitamin K that is helpful for making sure that that calcium is going to go to your bones where you want it to go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No, I normally, vitamin D3 and K2, those like in the form of drop or tablets, I do recommend to patients, but not the second one that you mentioned. I have to search it up.
It's just a form of K2. So it is, And I should say that vitamin D specifically and K, both of those are fat soluble vitamins. So you do want to take them, if you're taking them in a drop, that's usually like a lipid drop, so you're fine. But if you are taking it with a pill, this is one you want to take with food to make sure that you're maximizing absorption of it. Yeah.
That was very helpful. And so we talked about supplements, so vitamin D, omega-3, and also calcium for women, and some for hot flashes. What about for gut health? Any supplements like probiotics or prebiotics? Do you have any recommendations or thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I have, to be honest, some like mixed feelings on probiotics for supplements. And here's why. We have so many different strains of bacteria in our gut that we don't even know yet, like what all of them are and what all of them do. And so when we start to take like a specific strain of a probiotic that may have like multiple strains in there, like that's just a fraction of what's going on in our gut. I think if you're working with a practitioner and you are working on your gut, and they think a probiotic is going to be helpful, like I really have no problem. I take a probiotic myself, but sort of as a blanket recommendation, I don't always do that. And especially sometimes a probiotic might make you feel a little bit worse in the short term than, so yeah. So I'm not necessarily like a blanket for everybody. I do happen to like Akkermansia specifically, because that is a strain that has been linked to having a healthier gut, just not only just a microbiome in general, but having just a healthier gut barrier. So like that mucus layer, and I talked about those cells, and just really helping to make the gut healthier. And it is a specific strain that we know people who have higher levels of that tend to live longer and age better. So that is one that I do tend to like. And then prebiotics, it's sort of the same thing. So fiber is a prebiotic. So if you are getting your 30 grams of fiber a day, you may not need a prebiotic. Now, if you're struggling to meet that because you either can't tolerate high fiber foods or it's just you're just not there yet, yeah, sometimes those can be helpful. And again, it's sort of individualized. Some people seem to do better with certain types of prebiotic fibers than others. I do not religiously, but I do sometimes like to include specific types of prebiotic fibers that are called resistant starches, because those especially feed and fuel this healthy microbiome. So what a resistant starch is it's kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's a starch that is resistant to your body's digestion. So it sort of bypasses your digestion and it goes directly to feeding and fueling your gut microbiome. And so things, everyday foods that we might eat are, again, some of those whole grains and legumes and beans will be really high in resistant starch. A couple of sort of neato things of that resistant starch is like potatoes that are cooled and then you can eat them, like potato salad or even rice that's been cooled. In that cooling process, the starch, not all of it, but there is a buildup of resistant starch. So that's a great way. If you are somebody who does like to have potatoes or you like to have rice, just cook them the day before and then, have them, after they've cooled. And then you can also buy things like potato starch and, green banana powders that you could mix into smoothies. And those are great resistant starches. But again, that's not necessarily a for everybody type of thing. What I do, assuming you don't have any sort of like histamine issues or anything like that, I really like to encourage probiotic rich foods and trying to have 2 servings of that a day. So yogurt, kefir, kimchi, pickles and pickled vegetables that are not like the kind that have been sitting in the glass counter forever, but like you kind of, if you go to your farmer's market or they're in the refrigerator section or you pickle them on your own, because these have lots of different bacteria strains in there. And that is just really how we sort of evolved to get a lot of these bacteria into our system. So hit or miss on probiotics and prebiotics. Yeah.
I totally agree. Yes, it's not something that you want to take it on a regular basis, but unless you work with the practitioner and
Yeah,
it's focused on gut health, so
exactly.
that makes more sense. I
Yeah,
agree with
yeah,
you.
yeah. Like when you're
Um,
working on a healing journey and are really
mm,
struggling with something, then it's a very individualized care, and there's a lot of
yeah,
trial and error of what may work. But just sort of in general, um, I think there may be, as science is moving very rapidly in the gut microbiome space, and
yeah.
so I think over the course of hopefully next couple of years, we'll know a lot more about probiotic supplementation, and new strains are being sort of not only discovered, but like how do you then take this strain and put it in a capsule that is like shelf stable or refrigerator stable and actually like makes it through
Exactly.
your digestive system. And but I think we're going to be in hopefully a new space soon, with a lot of this. Science is in a really exciting space right
Yes.
now, and so
Yeah.
if we can, I know it doesn't help us for today, but it's something I think we're going to have a lot
Yeah.
more personalization in the stuff
Yeah,
that we
we're
take in
looking
the next couple of
forward
years.
to it. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
And of course, we can't finish today's talk without touching on sleep, which is a very, very major issue for
yeah,
many of the women, including myself, during
yeah,
perimenopause, and how we can help. Especially, we see that insulin resistance and sugar crash in the middle of night, 2, 3
yep,
a.m., and then cortisol spike, waking up wide open eyes. So what do you
yeah,
do and how to fix the problem
yeah.
with food at least?
Yeah, and so I think this is another case of having realistic expectations on what food can do. And for some women, there may be some great success. For some women, there may be mild success. And for
Mhm.
some, this is just, it's a real struggle. And it becomes this almost like vicious cycle. And then you even get this whole like psychological piece of it. Like, I know I'm not going to sleep tonight. And you get all in your head with it. But a couple of things that at the very least are great foundational places to start. Caffeine.
Mhm.
No caffeine after 2 p.m. It can linger. There are many people that I know say like, I can have caffeine right before I go to bed and have no problem sleeping. It's still messing with the different types of sleep that you get. So we go through different stages of sleep. And so caffeine at a later time can interfere with that. So no caffeine after 2 p.m. That is really like a hard and fast rule, unless like you have to drive somewhere and be awake. Like we really want to try and limit caffeine later in the day. Alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
For many women, that will help them fall to sleep, but that is going to wake you up almost
Yeah.
undoubtedly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another kind of hard and fast rule. And then you kind of have to play around with food timing. Some women do much better if they stop eating at like 5 or 6 and their body has just really fully digested everything and they get into much better quality sleep and they're able to sleep longer. Some women, as you said, like their blood sugar is kind of dipping and
Yeah.
rising, and so if they go too long their blood sugar actually might go low while they're sleeping and then that wakes them up. And so a great tool for that is playing with a CGM or a continuous blood glucose
Mm-hmm.
monitor and seeing how not only timing of food impacts your blood sugar, excuse me, timing of food impacts your blood sugar, but also just what types of food are impacting your blood sugar. So if your blood sugar is dropping in the middle of the night, and that's part of what's waking you up, then you want to have some things that are going to be almost like longer acting carbohydrates, right? You're going to want to have things with fiber and protein and some carb in there to help and stabilize you. You might notice from your CGM that, gosh, my blood sugar is like high all night.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that case, then you want to make sure that you are limiting all the carbs that you're having at night and
Mm-hmm.
maybe front loading them earlier in the day. Um, and then, there are certain foods that do have some like natural melatonin in them. So
Mm-hmm.
cherries, like kind of having a little, and again, this is where you have to play around with your blood sugar, but like some dark cherry juice or tart cherry juice, I should say. That is a natural
Mm-hmm.
source of melatonin. Even the spice nutmeg can help with GABA and serotonin and just helping to kind of get you into that like sleep rhythm. Sweet potatoes also will have a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
natural melatonin. So those are things you can try and incorporate. And then it's sort of getting to that bottom, like, is it your cortisol? Are there certain herbs you
Wow.
maybe want to be taking at night that can help to suppress that? And then what are your behaviors at night too? So not just like the foods that you're eating, but are we turning off our screens? Are we doing, a nighttime routine that really can calm us down and can get us sort of shifting from the busy day into sleep?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, there's a lot that goes into sleep, but it does really
Mm-hmm.
become this very vicious cycle. And it almost becomes almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy where you just know, like, I'm not going to have another sleepless night. So trying to break that psychological piece and give yourself a new narrative and, you know, it doesn't have to be like a massive, meditation practice, but even just some calming breaths that are going to help to just get you into like a new frame of mind. I love also using tools like listening to an audiobook. So maybe you don't have to turn on the light and read, or you're not going to turn on the
Mm-hmm.
TV. You can just close your eyes, or I'll listen to like some very soothing music or a sleepy
Mm-hmm.
time type of meditation. And
Yeah,
sometimes that's
activating
really
your
helpful.
vagal tone. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes really helpful, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's not. And this is sort of news to me, sort of in the past year, there are actually like therapists and, coaches that specifically just work with sleep and helping to break through some of not just the biology of why you can't sleep, but starting to really break through a lot of that psychological piece and those behaviors. And so if this is something you've tried everything from hormones to sleeping pills to this and that, and it's just nothing seems to be working, that could be another avenue, is to really look for not just like a sleep doctor who's going to prescribe you like something to sleep with, but a doctor that's really going to help you to create new pathways to get
Mm-hmm.
you into sleep. So I think that's a great, once I
Exactly.
met one and I was like, oh my God, that's such a cool job. Like, that's what you do? That's amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah. And especially people who suffer sleep disorders, it's good to talk to your doctor to get a sleep study,
Yeah.
especially for men with testosterone levels. So you want to rule
Yeah.
out sleep apnea. That's very
And
important.
for women too, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
many doctors, unfortunately, think of sleep apnea as like overweight men. And like my
No.
mom is like a tiny little, like if she even wears like 100 pounds, I don't know, right? Like she's like a tiny little woman and she got diagnosed with sleep apnea.
Yeah.
So doing a sleep study and speaking up for yourself, if that's something that you're worried about, like if you have a partner who sleeps with you and has noticed like you are, your breathing is off or you're snoring or just is noticing that like you kind of seem to catch your
Mm-hmm.
breath or stop breathing in your sleep, definitely go check that out. But even if you don't have somebody who has noticed that,
Exactly.
it's worth asking. There's sleep studies can be done at home now for
Mm-hmm.
many people. So yeah,
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, I love that 30, 30, 30. So 30 grams
yeah.
of protein, 30 grams of fiber, and 30 different types of vegetable in a week.
30 plants. So that
Plants.
includes fruit, vegetables,
Mm-hmm.
nuts, grains, and your herbs and spices.
Oh,
So, and then my last 30 on that, which is not nutrition related, but is 30 minutes of movement a day, right? Again,
yes.
that's the bare minimum. You can do more, but just finding some sort of joyful movement every day that gets you up and
Yeah.
moving around.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
that. It will
Try to
stick
keep
in
it
my
easy.
mind.
Yeah, just keep
It's
it easy
easy.
because it is so complicated. And you know, as much as like I love social media, it can be really, really
Yeah,
overwhelming. And there
it
is
is.
so much, not only just misinformation, but conflicting information.
Mhm.
And I just want women to feel very empowered in this time and
Yeah,
for them to focus on the things that matter the most. Right. And
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
while your nutrition is definitely one of the things that matters the most, whether you have like 30 or whether you have 40 grams of protein at this meal, like, is that a game changer? For some, maybe not for everyone, right? Like, so let's just make it for the most of us, make it simpler.
Easy.
Yeah,
Yeah, simple.
yeah. I just saw the kindly repeat 30, 30, 30. So 30 grams of protein per meal, 30 grams of fiber a day, and then 30 grams of, I'm not 30 grams, 30 different plant foods a week. So it's
Mm.
not 30 at every meal. So that's not as easy as I wish it was, but 30
It
grams of
is.
protein a
Still, it
meal,
is.
30
Yeah.
grams of fiber a day, and 30 different plant foods a week. And I don't know, I need a tech person because I feel like there's got to be some cool app that can make this like a very easy like tracking system.
And 30 minutes of movement.
In
Don't
30 minutes
forget
of
that
movement.
every day.
Exactly.
That's
Every
so
day.
important. That's
Yeah.
something that we should all do.
Yes, exactly.
Let's
And
start
again,
it
like
from today.
I don't care if it is walking or it is weightlifting. Like, I mean, for certain goals, obviously it matters, but just
Yeah.
30 minutes of movement.
Hmm.
We live in a world where, at least in the US, I think like, again, I'm butchering my statistics, so don't quote me on this, but it's something like 70% of us don't meet the recommendations for exercise. And so you've got all these like influencers out there who are talking about you've got to lift heavy or you've got to do this or you've got to do that. Like, how about
Uh,
let's just get us moving? And then once
yeah.
you are moving
To
30 minutes
be
every day,
exactly.
now let's talk about strength
Yeah.
training and whether you should lift heavy. And if you're already doing this, great. That's a separate
Hmm.
conversation on how to
Yeah.
optimize what you're already
So
doing. But if
that's
you're
why
not
I
doing
always
it,
say it has to be personalized. We can't
yeah,
generalize these things.
yeah,
It's just for some people, it's so unrealistic. They can't even, they
yeah,
don't move. They don't
exactly.
walk for 10 minutes. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And even my 30, 30, 30, right? That's not for everybody, right? If your
Yeah.
gut is a mess, 30 grams of fiber might be a lot for you.
Yeah.
If you have a kidney issue, maybe you don't want 30 grams of protein at every meal. So that is
Yeah.
not a blanket statement for every single
I
person, but
understand. Yeah.
it's a good, I think a good foundation for most,
Yeah. It's very
healthy
helpful.
women. Good. I'm so glad.
So one last question, maybe
Yeah.
before we say goodbye, is what is the only or one food in perimenopause that you think everyone should take or most women have to have it?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm slightly biased on this, but I would probably say dark chocolate because it is my
Magnesium,
yeah, so it is, so there is some truth that it's
antioxidants.
yeah, there's
Mhm.
antioxidants, there are polyphenols in it. There
Oh,
is actually the type of fat that is in dark chocolate is actually, even though it is a saturated fat, it is not linked with heart disease. Um, and there just is, if like you're having a sweet craving, a little square of dark chocolate can really help to quell that and quench that. So I look for dark chocolate that is at least 70% cacao,
mhm.
which again might be very strong for some people. I have sort of moved my way up that now like I like 80 or 88.
Yeah.
Um, but it just is serves the purpose of a treat yourself kind of moment, but
Mhm.
also really can give you some deep nourishment as well. So that would be I have a square of dark chocolate sometimes two, every night after dinner.
Yeah, I love it too. It's so good.
Yeah.
And I moved myself up to 85,
Yeah.
90%. So yeah.
Yep, I'm with you.
So
I'm with you now too. It's funny because like if somebody gives me like a Hershey or something like that, I'm like, this is not even worth it to me. I don't like it anymore.
no, my
Um,
kids sometimes text it and say, Mommy, what's this? Is it candles?
yeah,
What's this texture?
well, I gotta tell you, I just came back from Switzerland, so I bought a lot of chocolate while I was there.
Mm.
And even their dark chocolate, like it just melts so beautifully.
Wow.
And there's just very few brands in the US that I've found that like
Yeah,
have that
it's
wonderful like mouthfeel. So yeah.
not none here in Canada, not
Yeah,
none of
yeah.
them.
I mean,
So
Canada's kind of like US North, so you kind of are
yeah.
the same. Like, so I
Mm.
found a couple of like local, so I live in New York, just outside of New York City, but like a couple of local
Mm.
chocolatiers that do have some really beautiful chocolate, but it's very expensive, so it's kind of got to be a
Mm.
treat. Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting me
Yes,
on.
it was
And
amazing.
yeah, unfortunately,
Very
I can't
insightful.
read Arabic, so I don't know if I answered everybody's questions, but please feel free
Yes,
to
it's
connect with me.
Farsi. They
Oh, it's
write in
Farsi, excuse
Farsi. Yeah.
me. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
excuse me.
good.
But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
many,
but
many questions.
yeah,
Yes.
feel free to connect with me on Instagram, or if you want to follow up
Sure.
with me, I'm happy to answer any questions. Like I said, this is
Yes.
a topic I could talk about all day long. So,
It was great, and hopefully we meet each other again soon.
yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Have
All
a
right,
lovely
take care.
weekend, everyone.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you.